Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War Warhammer 2 Quick Match gameplay. This time around, it's a little bit of a double cast because this first match is really short and I just wanted to sort of demonstrate a good Skaven build against Brettonia. Because Skaven do have some serious issues with heavy cav and I figured it might be something a little interesting. But the second match is definitely the one I want to demonstrate more so. But yeah, I've been playing more and more Skaven lately and I can't say I've been too happy with them. I've kind of been reminded of why I don't really play much Skaven to begin with, but I've been trying to make a bunch of their sort of more novel units work, trying to make weapon teams work, trying to try out different strategies and different experimental strats, sort of. And I've been coming to the conclusion that Skaven are just probably the worst faction in the game at the moment, from a balance perspective. I think that by far they basically don't have any exceptionally good matchups. They're basically about 50-50 in every matchup they go into. And I'd say they've got several very bad matchups. So from that perspective, I've just not been very impressed with Skaven. I can't say I've really had that much fun with them, but I've been trying out different stuff and trying to make them work. So I figured for any of you who might like Skaven, I might as well try to cast a few and try a few games and just see what's possible. So for my lord here, I did decide to go with Skrull, because there's not much to say there. There's not much. He's just the most competitive lord right now, I think. He does have a few issues with being somewhat snipeable. He's got very low armor, somewhat low HP. But, you know, he does cause fear. He does have Blessed with Filth. He's got Leadership Debuff with Contaminated, which can potentially, if you've got other... units like, say, Warpfire Throws, you can actually stack with those, get you a bunch of leadership debuffs. He's got Stand Your Ground, he's got Rod of Disruption, Liber Bubonicus, Pestilent Birth, Vermintide, Blessed with Filth, as well as Pestilent Breath. So a whole bunch of stuff there. Of course, Aura of Pestilence for the debuff, and Plague Rash is surprisingly decent in my opinion, because you tend to cast quite a bit, and continuously debuffing your opponent's speed and vigor is definitely nifty. Now here, I did decide to go very Warp Lightning Cannon heavy because I was going against Brettonia, and honestly, Skaven don't have very many good anti-large options, especially against a faction that has a lot of non-AP, but non-AP mass sort of cav units. The thing is, you can bring Hell Pit Abominations. With Hell Pit Abominations, your Brettonian opponent will probably just sweep them aside in your infantry in a single cavalry charge, isolate your Hell Pit Abomination, and beat the snot out of them with, say, Grail Knights. If you bring Rat Ogres, basically the same things are likely to happen. Poison Globes, which I did bring a few here, are kind of a point defense unit. They don't have enough range, in my opinion, enough flexibility. And Stormwind Halberds are similarly inflexible, but I did bring 3 units of them here to cover my 3 Warp Lightning Cannons. So this is a very Warp Lightning Cannon heavy build. You can see my opponent's Grand Lights immediately getting clobbered there, losing about a third of their strength in a single volley from that crossfire. So it's pretty brutal stuff. And of course, my opponent, even if he does have Lore of Life, which he actually does not have here, is not going to be able to bring any models back. Now looking at the rest of this build, you can see my front line here is entirely composed of spears, so the biggest threat here by far is cavalry from Brettonia. Nothing else Brettonia puts on the table is really that dangerous to you. So a bunch of clarinet spears. They are backed by 2 poison wind globes, so if my opponent manages to get cav into the back line, either here, or maybe get some cavalry here, or had some mounted yeomen hidden, anything like that, the poison wind globes could then shift around and flex and fire in that direction. Then we've got the 3 Stormwind Halberds, of course, providing further defense, and, you know, the front line here is just a bunch of clarinet spears, but they should be able to hold if my opponent brings any sort of heavy infantry force, which he did go with here. Personally, I'm a very cav-heavy Brettonia player, so I wouldn't really do that, but it definitely has some merit against Skaven, who don't have very good infantry to begin with. Get see, we are chipping away at Knights of the Lionheart. My opponent only brought 2 Grail Knights and Knights of the Lionheart. Not a bad choice. You can see they are already taking some pretty nasty casualties there. These poor Grail Knights are down to under half health strength. These Knights of the Lionheart are down by a third of their HP. Whenever they expose themselves from the flank like this, they are obviously going to be exposed to crossfire. Up in the sky, we do have a good King Louis, who's got all of his kit except the Lion's Shield and the Sword of Couronne, or the Shield of Couronne, or maybe it's the Sword of Couronne. Either way, no debuffs, which I think is a bit of a mistake. No Sword of Couronne, no Shield of Couronne. Both of those are very useful against Skaven, especially the Shield, just because it mitigates magic and missile damage, which is huge against Warp Lightning Cannons and Poison Wind Globes, both from magic and our missiles. But you can see the poor knights here just getting clobbered, and now my opponent, in a bit of a desperate maneuver here, is just going to charge into my front line with his Knights of the Lionhearted. He does get Lewin here on the cannons, a 1-1 cannon, but we immediately do pull the Stormwind in. The Stormmen were a little too far back, which was a bit of a mistake, but you can see my opponent here. He is pushing into the front line, but honestly, he's already down most of his Grey Knights. 2/3 of his Grey Knights gone there. These Knights of the Lionhearted down by about a third, getting bogged down in Clanrat Spears. They charge braced Clanrat Spears, and in the protracted fight, these guys are definitely going to get dragged into the muck and lose. And Louis over here just getting clobbered by Liber Bonicus and Focus Fire. We do charge into melee here, but at this point, my opponent's simply just going to GG out, because it really is just endgame. He doesn't have much else to do there. Now, from a Brettonian perspective, I recommend going cav heavy. You don't have to go with the most elite cav. I would still bring a handful of Grey Knights to deal with the big monsters, but you can go with more Knights of the Realm type style, and even Knights Errant, Defenders of the Fleur de Lis. All those are very good units. You can just run amok in the Skaven backline with. You might lose a cav unit or two on the way in to the Warplating Cannon, stuff like that, but you got to commit, you got to go in. Another recommendation I have is to push in with your infantry first. Make sure your infantry are within range, or about basically where you want them, or almost in range of your opponent before you launch your cav in, because otherwise your cav is going to be taking a huge beating as they're preparing to attack, and your infantry won't even be in a position to help at all. So you're basically just taking losses for no gain. So from that perspective, I'd say my opponent's build here, gameplay there was a little bit flawed, but really, if you're going in a Skaven, I think this is a decent sort of comp. You've got all this damage coming out of these Warplating Cannons. You can really whittle down your opponent's troops over time. You can see these guys, this 33, 32 kills, all against high-value targets like Grail Knights and Knights of the Lionhearted, and doing some great damage to King Louis there. So definitely some fun stuff there for the Skaven. But without further ado, I really do want to go into a second Skaven matchup against the High Elves this time around. So this time around, we are in on MP Peak Pass, and this is a map that is a little tough, I think, for this in some ways for this game, because you're very artillery dependent, usually as Skaven, and there is this very prominent sort of ridge on this map, which if you put your cannons down on the low ground, they'll often struggle to get an arc. So you're essentially reduced to either deploying very far back or very far forward and then trying to push into a firing position immediately. And of course, against High Elves, there is a bit of a risk that they'll go kite heavy. They'll bring Shadow Warriors and heavy cav and just be a pain in the rear in general, and then you're going to have a rough time sort of dealing with them. So what I decided to do here is try to make a build that could be a bit flexible, deal with some monsters, deal to an extent with heavy infantry if it push came to shove with the Warplating Cannons, and just have a very solid sort of gun line in general. So what I decided to do here is I did bring Skrulk again. There's not much to say there. He's got Pestilent Birth, Pestilent Breath, Blessed with Filth, Vermintide, Liber Bonicus, Rod of Corruption, Stand Your Ground. So not much to say there. All of Pestilence, of course, as usual in Plague Crash. So really, I don't have much to say there. It just is what it is. Frontline, as you can see, it's a bit haphazard here because of the deployment zone. The deployment zone is basically just right. This is basically the deployment zone. Like that's the line of where it is, and we're deployed right on it, so that's why you can see that it's a bit haphazard. But the front line is these Clanrat Spears with shields, who are immediately going to start pushing forward to sort of get a commanding defensive position. In the back line, we have a whole bunch of Clanrat Spears, once again providing some point anti-large, and then 2 units of Stormmen Halberds, also providing some additional defensive capacity. And I was figuring that if my opponent decided to push through the woods, these Stormmen Halberds over here could be in a bit of an ambush position. And my opponent, if he wasn't paying attention, he might just kind of plow into them and find himself in a rough spot if he decided to go, say, push in with some Dragon Princes, which are pretty common sight, or even Silver Helms units like that. The Stormmen would kind of tear them apart. Now, the main killing power here is the 3 Warblinding Cannons, but I also did bring some slight point defense. But I decided not to go with Globe Throwers because I wanted something that could shoot back at archers. So I went with Gutter Runners with Poison, a single unit of them, as well as 2 units of Gutter Runners with Slings. The Slings, of course, have greater range and greater damage over time. They've got much more ammo, and their damage per shot is actually not much different. You might assume that the Gutter Runners with Throwing Stars are going to do more damage, but if you look, you can see 12 and 2 versus 11 and 3. So really, the Shuriken have a lot more overall damage, or a lot less overall damage, and it's one of the reasons I've never been a big fan of this unit. I know a lot of people just swear by these guys or really rely on them because they've got 360 fire, but I really never liked them just because of that low range. But here, they're a bit of a goon squad. If my opponent pushes in against my Gutter Runner Slingers, we've got all those, we've got some good range to sort of poke and prod, and then if my opponent pushes in, the Gutter Runners with Poison can then apply their Poison attack in a 360 while all of these units are fleeing from, say, heavy cav. And combined with their net skill, which is, I do believe, minus 18%, it is minus 18% speed, you can get a huge debuff to enemy speed. You can drop them by about 40%, and this whole time, as I'm fleeing back to my lines, I could be pounding that cavalry with warp lightning cannons. So, kind of hoping to terrorize my opponent that way. You can see here we are going to pop some shots at the Star Dragon. My opponent did go very dragon heavy, so Star Dragon on one end, Princess on the other, and a Mage of Life here with Regrowth and Earth Blood, as well as the Starwood Staff. The front line here is composed of spears, backed by 2 Swordmasters of Hoeth, which are kind of overkill, but at the same time they will dominate Skaven pretty decisively. But you can see immediately I decided, because my opponent was microing his dragons at max range, I decided to forget that. I'm not going to let him waste my ammo like that, so we're just going to chip away this Mage of Life. And it's honestly arguably a bigger threat than either of the dragons, because the dragons can be whittled down. The Mage of Life, though, if it keeps healing them, it's going to be a monster to deal with. Finally, my opponent does have some archers here in the back line, who are a bit of a nuisance, but, you know, they're pushing in. We'll see how they do. Here, the poor spears and swordmasters do take actually a pretty nasty shot. They're taking 6 spearmen and 5 or 4 swordmasters there. But my opponent is now once again microing away to his heart's content with his Mage of Life. This is one of those annoying things. Initially, when you're kind of trying to close the gap, oftentimes your opponent will have the time to micro a specific unit. But we are every little bit of damage we can get in on the mage is pretty good. And you can see here we are going to pull back our skirmishers. A bit of an accidental fire there on the spearmen. I left them on fire at will, but still, it's okay. Over here, the Mage of Life getting absolutely clobbered, getting beaten in the face and down to 1800 HP. And in the meantime, we are going to sort of... You can see a lot of sort of coincident or accidental fire here going into the archers and all that sort of stuff, but we are going to push our front line in while keeping our spears and halberds in reserve. What I probably should have done at this point is pulled these halberds out and put them into a defending position, but I did not, so a bit of a mistake there on my part. What we are going to do, though, immediately is summon some Plague Monks to harass this back line, and also to block up these Swordmasters. And you can see here our Slingers pounding away at the archers, really whittling them down. Of course, with their pathetic armor of 15, they're not going to be able to hold up very well. And unfortunately, though, my opponent is going to start diving in on my cannons. You can see there he does dive on the Warp Lightning Cannon with his dragon. He does immediately get hit by the snares from the Gutter Runners, and we are going to pivot and start throwing our stars and all that sort of stuff at him. But, you know, the dragon's doing some nasty work here. The Warp Lightning Cannon very badly beat up. We are trying to whittle down the Mage of Life because I still see it as a bigger threat. A lovely Pestilent Breath there, melting these archers. 3 units of them essentially getting annihilated in a single cast. And now the Mage of Life is actually going to rout. She did overcast something there. I think an Earth Flood over here on the front line. Kind of wasted, honestly, because Atlantean Spears aren't doing a lot of damage, and they're not even focused on her. But over here, my opponent does tear out my cannon crew, actually taking 2 of the 3 guns offline, which really sucks. And over here, I'm not even sure what killed this gun. It might have been friendly fire. I don't even know what killed it. But regardless, we are down to just 1, 2, and then we're just down to 5 guns out of our starting 9, which is definitely a bit of a problem. But we are able to force off the Mage of Life, and my opponent is at this point sort of giving up on trying to shut down the artillery and focusing on Skrull, because this front line fight is going very rough for him. Even though, honestly, he could have just let his Swordmasters here to keep working. But this does mean with the Princess sort of pulling up, we're going to hit her with the Libra Robonicus, and then we are going to open fire with all of our Slingers, our Gutter Runners, and all those units. And they're doing some nasty damage. Honestly, in retrospect, I could have possibly just brought like 1 or 2 Warp Lightning Cannons and brought more of these Slingers, because the chip damage they're doing is immense. You got to keep in mind, there is 90 models of these guys. Now, sure, these guys did lose 8, but, you know, 90, 90, 90. This is 270 models hitting with 2 to 3 AP apiece, and they're doing immense damage to this Princess. And she's going down like a 9-pin. She's down to 80 HP. Unfortunately, Skrull here does rout. He isn't immune to psychology, but it doesn't really matter. This Princess is going to go down very, very hard. You can see she's down to 1200 HP. The Warp Lightning Cannon misses there. But she's going to be forced to flee, and that's just going to leave that Soul Star Dragon there. My opponent now, he is going to get a heal here. I do believe a regrowth. Unfortunately, I kept trying to chip away this Mage of Life, but just wasn't able to pull it off. But she does actually end up suiciding there with another overcast. Not even sure where. But the end result is the Princess is going to get away with that regrowth. She's going to get back, and you can see just how much HP she's getting back. She came back by about 1000 HP, but we are going to keep firing at her with the Warp Lightning Cannons, doing some damage. And pull back our shooting, which kind of got a little over greedy there. But, you know, Pestilent Breath, we melt some Spearmen here. We have pulled our Halberds out of the woodwork, and now we're going to be able to plunge in against the Wood Elves, or against the High Elves if push comes to shove. You can see more crossfire pounding away at the Star Dragon. Now the Princess is coming back, and my opponent is very much trying to snipe Skrulk, and it kind of makes sense, because if he gets rid of Skrulk here, he is probably going to be able to take the game. Despite the fact that I've got such a commanding lead at this point, despite the fact that he's lost his Mage of Life and she's not going to come back, despite the fact that his Princess is really badly beat up, down to 2500 HP. I think she actually got another heal in there somewhere. I think it was actually another Earthblood cast on the Princess. But despite all of that, the Princess, you know, very badly beat up right now. And my opponent can still possibly take it if he manages to get rid of Skulk. If Skulk's dead, I'm not going to have the leadership to hold out. So Skulk desperately trying to juke here, pop in stand your ground just to stay alive. We are just pounding the princess here, really trying to take her offline and pushing in all our little pebbles here, just raining in on this very ugly dragon. And you can see we're just pounding away, trying to focus fire as best we can. Skulk there juking. Got the moves like Jagger there, and we do pop Rod of Corruption here just to melt down these Swordmasters of Hoeth, which of course is still a pretty big threat, all despite everything. But the princess here is finally going to go down, you can see, and my opponent is actually just going to GG out in this stage. With the princess effectively gone and the Star Dragon very badly beat up, he would have just been reduced to Swordmasters, who could honestly still do some damage, but we did have a lot of Slingers online. We were harassing his archers off the field. He was basically down to just a handful of Crippled Spears and the Swordmasters. So, good game to my opponent. I do still think this is a pretty bad matchup for Skaven. If your opponent goes heavy on Shadow Warriors, this build that I brought here, I think would have struggled immensely, and I don't really know. Probably investing more in Gutter Runners would have been the right move. I could have easily dropped the Warp Lightning Cannon, dropped one of the Clan Rats, and made room for another 2 Gutter Runners with Slingers, which would have been, I think, a pretty solid choice or solid decision. For my opponent's build, the Dragon focus, I don't know if it's the right idea against Skaven. Like, it does give you some fear and terror causing units, but you can probably just, and even if you'd want the terror though, you can probably get away with just a Phoenix. Plus that can bomb the blobs. You could bring a cheaper dragon. You don't really need a Star Dragon for the Skaven, unless you're looking to dual help at Abominations, but against those, you've got archers. Really, I think, sorry, oops, I kind of knocked my headset off there, but you, can basically get away with a lot of cheaper stuff, and I don't, and you can get away with Shadow Warriors, I think, and Dragon Princes. That you're generally going to get better results out of those. But regardless, good game to my opponent here. I do hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe down below if you've not already. If you have any comments, any criticism, any questions, as usual, don't hesitate to ask. I'll do my best to respond as soon as I can. I do appreciate you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye for now.